Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to the channel. So I just finished part 1 of the 3rd season of Bridgerton, and there are a few sociological inquiries and just discussions that I feel are begging to be discussed. Particularly, I always find it a thing of curiosity when a narrative or an iteration of centuries past finds its predominant favor within a particular audience, and specifically with Bridgerton, we find it is very popular with the female observer. When we talk about which desirabilities are prioritized and which idealizations are diminished, I think it is so important to focus on the broader scope of the story, that is, the storyteller. The storyteller will impose their prioritizations and idealizations into the narrative, into the script, and we absorb that. I think if you look carefully, you can read into what exactly those prioritizations and idealizations are by looking at the creative liberties taken within the script. For example, there is a reason that Queen Charlotte is black, and, a number of ethnic substitutions taken to change and to adapt to the Regency era context as told by Netflix's Bridgerton. Film truly cannot escape the culture war, and I'm convinced that embedded into the female-centric appeal that the series has is general thought surrounding which interpersonal idealizations and struggles are most relatable. Leftovers, being attracted to someone who has more options than you do. The privilege of beauty, but more importantly, privilege of youth and implicit fertility. Lady Whistledown had a gossip column where she talked about the most intriguing, the most titillating stories that circulated within the court. In the 21st century, we definitely have the same online parallel. I'm talking about the stories of leftover women, men indulging in fleeting pleasures, and the pursuit of happily ever afters are timeless. Yet the ones that gain the most traction and investment are the ones that resonate most deeply with contemporary audiences, just like Bridgerton. For your familiarity with the series or otherwise, we're going to discuss the most predominant themes in season 3. I hope you're comfortable. I hope you enjoy this with me. I'm Catherine, and today we're going to talk about the female gaze, desirability politics, and leftover romantics. Without further ado, let's begin.
Good night, Mr. Bridgerton.
Do you not need a chaperone?
Spinsters do not need chaperones.
You are not a spinster.
I'm in my 3rd year on the marriage mark with no prospects to show for it. What would you call that? Of course, you would never court me. I am the laughingstock of the town, even when I changed my entire wardrobe. It just never occurred to me that you, of all people, could be so cruel.
Now, I should probably set up a basis for all of this just so that you understand why you should care about the characters and dynamics I'm going to tell you that you need to care about. So for this very brief recap, contextualization, just stay with me, especially if you've forgotten half the plot. In the context of the events of Bridgerton, a season refers to a social season in Regency era London high society. In this setting, a season typically refers to a specific period when debutantes are presented to high society, attending social events and balls to find suitable matches for marriage. In Bridgerton, each season of the series focuses on a different set of characters within the Bridgerton family and their romantic endeavors. In the context of the Queen choosing a diamond, the Bridgertons and other elite families are part of the ton, which is basically just the high society of London. The Queen's selection of a diamond refers to her role in overseeing the debutantes of the season and choosing the most exceptional debutante, symbolically known as the diamond of the season. The Queen exerts her power and influence over the social scene in Bridgerton, so she's quite a tough character. We see this as a recurring theme within the series. Women are made hardened by the loss of their husbands. So the Queen micromanages the social season, right? She basically provides input on the relationships and makes sure that the public perception of the monarchy remains relatively positive. On another note, which I might delve into if I ever discuss season 2, Charlotte, as the first black queen, incites what is called the Great Experiment. In Netflix's revision to the racial politics of the era, Lady Agatha Danbury champions this change. She is constantly reminding the Queen of her duty to create an inclusive society. Now, there is a lot we can talk about there. I have a lot of opinions on that. I'm not particularly sympathetic to the choices made there, but that is a discussion for another video. In Bridgerton season 2, the Queen clashes with Lady Whistledown, and they have this very interesting rivalry that happens. Essentially, Lady Whistledown is an anonymous gossip columnist whose stories, much like modern media, shape our conversations, our intrigue, our interest. This conflict introduces us to Penelope Featherington, who is the main character of season 3. So her secret identity is obviously Lady Whistledown, and this adds a layer of complexity to her character. Why? well, she's honest, but she also has the potential to be quite cruel in her stories. She's also equally cruel to herself when she tells her own story, which is quite obviously informative of the way she looks at herself and how she views the way she is valued in relationship to all of the other dynamics within the series. It's actually quite psychologically informative to write about yourself. I encourage you to do it. Penelope is the youngest daughter of the Featherington family, which is just another noble household within Regency era London. She is best friends with Eloise Bridgerton and harbors this long-term crush on Eloise's brother, Colin Bridgerton. Her feelings are hurt when Colin reveals to his friends in somewhat confidence that he would never go for someone like Penelope.
Pen,
I overheard you at my mama's ball last season, telling everyone how you would never ever court Penelope Featherington.
perhaps we should talk about this somewhere more private.
Because I embarrass you.
Now, this is particularly significant because Penelope is in her third year out in society and still has no marriage prospects. This situation really does highlight the intense pressure on women in the Regency era to marry, to settle down, to make sure that you are, locked in quickly, lest you become a leftover. All right, so Colin, guys, has just returned from... Honestly, I don't know. I don't know where Colin was. I just know that he was gone. I don't know what he was doing. Apparently he went to like 7 cities. Point is, Colin is back, and guys, he is unrecognizable. This transformation is a recurring theme in Julia Quinn's books, and I've seen a lot of discourse around this. As the male lead, Colin embodies the archetype of the rake. Now, what is a rake? A rake is defined as a sexually promiscuous man, charming, desirable, and very skillful with his words. This archetype is evident in Colin's behavior. In the first episode, in the third episode, in the fourth episode, he frequents brothels and flirts with basically every woman besides Penelope. He knows what he's doing and he is effective. And this may be why Penelope asks him how to navigate the social scene, because Penelope characteristically she's quite awkward. She wants to figure out how to do what Colin is doing with the same effortless charm to obviously attract a mate. Colin's insatiable appetite for female attention is ultimately and I'm not sure that everybody shares the sentiment, but speaking purely for myself, it was difficult to get into. It was unattractive. This characteristic is double-edged, and it is an understandable point of contention amongst fans. The aversion to the rake's promiscuity is understandable. Sexual indiscretion often reflects a compromise in one's temperamental control. Historically, male promiscuity was defined as a marker of desirability, but even the directors of Bridgerton struggled to seemingly move beyond this perception, which was also a difficult this was difficult to get over for me when watching the series. I personally found myself much more invested and interested in Francesca's attraction to John Sterling. While their connection wasn't particularly unique, it was definitely the most understandable to me. John is attractive in a way that isn't ostentatious. He doesn't desperately seek out Francesca's attention, despite her being the new diamond of the season. Now, as much as I am still so invested in this relationship, I don't want to get too much into it because, spoiler, guys, I'm about to spoil their story with relation to the books. So they do get married and he dies of a brain aneurysm. And Francesca ends up having a love story with his cousin, Michael? Anyway, on the other side of things, we see Pen really wrestling with the idea of growing older and not being married. She's mocked for her singlehood.
You're so mature now.
Well, I am of age. I am out in society. Therefore, I have more important, mature things to worry about.
Like what?
Like marriage.
You do not care about marriage.
Well, what do I do? I cannot expect you to understand. Not everyone can be a pretty Bridgerton.
But also her concern and craving is valid for diminishing fertility potential as she ages, and she is juxtaposed against her married, eminently pregnant sisters. There is a rather heartbreaking line. She says, when her mother, in all ways flustered and bothered, when Lord Dudley, the only man who has ever showed any remote interest in her, rescinds on his potential proposal, in suspicion of potential feelings between Pen and Colin. Pen says, quite pained and tearful to her mother, do I only matter to you if I have a lord's engagement ring on my finger? I think what is so sorely missed is how fundamentally haunting that question is. It is a question that has plagued many a spinster over the millennia, but also many a modern 21st century woman. Is it possible to be cared for beyond what my youth and childbearing potential may provide?
Lady Crane was right about you.
Lady Crane? What did she say?
That you cared for me. That you would never forsake me. I'm beginning to believe that now.
We see this idea teased for an older widowed woman with many children, Lady Bridgerton, in her blossoming attraction to Lady Danbury's brother, who has recently just returned to London. I'm also very interested in where that story might go. But what I'm getting at, and what I think Penelope is wrestling with and asking herself, is an inquisition into her own identity. What Pen is essentially saying, and what I deeply relate to, is, could I be valued for my virtue and loyalty to protecting your deepest concerns, your deepest vulnerabilities in this long-term friendship we've cultivated over time? Virtue, by the way, that Pen has kept in cast iron preservation all of her life for Colin. Note that Colin has not done the same, but as a man, he is seemingly rewarded for the same sexual indiscrimination. Is it because his desirability on the social scene increases? But Pen's pickiness in combination with her awkwardness and non-conformity to the Eurocentric beauty standard of that time works almost like a triple destructor to her prospects. Yes, she made this pact with Eloise to remain best friends, to remain spinsters forever, unaffected by the potential threats to their friendship posed by male favorabilities. But the craving, to be desired beyond the platonic, but not an exclusion to the platonic, is a desire I think much of Bridgerton's female audience can identify with. The platonic is absolutely fundamental because these are the bones to emotional intimacy. But without the platonic, all you have is this carnal indulgence and reducing someone to a function of how they can sexually pleasure you. The latter for which I think might be a motivation for why Colin so frequently visits the brothels. Pen's lowest points are truly in the first several episodes of the season. Her sense of hopelessness in being undesired and never experiencing affection beyond the platonic becomes heartbreakingly apparent when she quite literally, guys, begs for Colin to kiss her.
Colin, could I ask you something?
Of course.
Would you kiss me?
Penelope.
It would not have to mean anything. And I would never expect anything from you because of it, but I am nearly on the shelf and I have never been kissed and I am not certain I ever will be. I could die tomorrow.
You're not going to die tomorrow.
But I could and it would kill me.
You would already be dead.
I do not wish to die without ever having been kissed. Please.
It's painful to watch her in such a vulnerable state. While the outcome, Colin realizing his potential romantic feelings for Penelope, was positive, I think it highlights a deeper issue. Penelope knows full well that Colin may never reciprocate the same depth of intimacy that she feels, but she's still willing to give him that experience, despite understanding that he may not protect her vulnerability as a genuinely caring partner would. Colin's reaction to the kiss, we need to understand, was exceptional. But this scenario is not common. What I'm basically just saying is I wouldn't recommend that you kiss someone hoping that, something will just click for them and they'll realize that, oh gosh, I'm in love with this person. Like, no, that doesn't happen. Obviously, that is not what Pen did. What she did was more of a farewell. Still, though, it was a desperate gamble, which is why I so hate that she felt like she needed to do it. I know this particular perspective, it will not be popular amongst a lot of the viewers. Many people enjoyed the kiss. I just hated the fact that she got into the point that such compromise was necessary. I just adore Pen so much. She deserves more than that, Anyway, there is so much more that I could discuss, but obviously this is only part 1. I think part 2 is coming sometime in June. But I think we're gonna wrap this up with basically the reason I wanted to film a brief analysis on this series. There's a particular scene that really stood out to me. We see a rare instance of reckoning. And I think the reason this scene kind of stuck with me is because it speaks to the damage to one's perspective that indiscriminate sexual pursuits can have on your closest bonds. Lady Whistledown describes Colin as being disingenuous to himself in embracing this new rakish persona. I think we often forget that when we're not true to who we are, deep down inside, we adopt a certain recklessness, a certain carelessness to diverge from the inner self we are trying to erase. This is what I see in Colin, a recklessness in indulgence. On multiple occasions, we see Colin engaging in typical, bachelor locker room chat with his guy friends, discussing their sexual escapades and the attributes of the woman that they've been with. But Colin says something very interesting. He suddenly, for the first time, pressed that they dared to address each other in these discussions as gentlemen, talking about the things that they do, talking about women the way that they do, And this is only after he shared the most sparing, the most restrained form of intimacy with a woman he's just realized he actually values for her virtue, for her friendship, for her loyalty. And I think he says the following line in recognition to the vulnerability, however small it was, because remember, intimacy is vulnerability, that Pen had just given him in begging him for that kiss. Pen knowing full well that he would probably treat it with the same, non-regard that he had his other intimacies, but she'd made peace with that compromise because truly she'd been that desperate. The thing is, she shouldn't have, because someone who treats your vulnerability like a transient hiccup shouldn't get to have it because they don't deserve it. If Colin hadn't had that light bulb moment, realized that, oh gosh, I'm in love with Penelope, if that hadn't happened, I get that Pen, did it for herself. The meaning of that intimacy so much more than just a fleeting moment. But Colin wouldn't have deserved it. I don't know, everything in that farewell, in that moment where Penelope really was closing the door on her love life, on her prospects for marriage, for being a mother, for being loved, basically. All of that was within that kiss. Like all of those years of never letting a man touch her, all of those years of craving affection and then begging for that from somebody who she knows isn't emotionally in the position to give her that at the time. Obviously, Colin ends up waking up. But if he hadn't, let's be honest, it's more likely in a real life situation that he wouldn't have woken up to that. If that was truly Pen's lowest moment, and there was so much meaning and grief in begging Colin just to be kissed. I don't know guys, it's just too heavy, it's too tragic. When something for her at least, but not for him, imbued with so much weight, is potentially treated like it's nothing. It's just this, because it's not. I think that's the thing with the dilution of a lot of these expressions of intimacy. When you hear things like, oh, I love you, and it's thrown around flippantly, like I cringe inside. Because you shouldn't throw that phrase away to anyone and everyone under the sun. Not for your sake, no, but because not everyone deserves that. Not only that, but not everybody will preserve that and protect that with the consideration, with the regard that it deserves. Anyway, this is what Colin said, and I think it wraps things up very well. Forgive me, but is it not tiring to remain cavalier about the one thing in life that has genuine meaning? Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see your thoughts in the comment section down below. I will see you next time. You take care and goodbye.